What up, nerds? My name is Leslie Smith. Welcome to the Nerdy Narrative. Today I am going to go over my March monthly wrap-up. All of the books that I read in the month of March. It's quite a list. I'm quite shocked considering everything that happened in the month, but I did do quite a bit of audiobooking. So first on the list of audiobooks is The Stranger Times by C.K. McDonald. This was sent to me by my friend Ev, and I absolutely love the series. It is the first book in the series. There's currently 2 books out. It is narrated by Brendan McDonald, and he does an amazing job. The Stranger Times is a paranormal thriller about a newspaper and its employees. They report on the weird and wacky, the things that go bump in the night. However, a random suicide changes everything, and before you know it, the newspaper staff have become investigators. They're looking into the suicide that they aren't convinced is a suicide. And one thing leads to another, and this group finds themselves in all sorts of tight spots. In addition to the thriller aspect, the mystery aspect, this story is so funny. It's hilarious. The author, C.K. McDonald, you might know him better as Queeve McDonald. He is a former Irish stand-up comedian, also used to write for TV. You know, he brings that humor into this story and it is so good. In fact, The Stranger Times was so good. I did something I haven't done in years. I went right into book 2, which was This Charming Man. Another hit. The first book was fantastic. The second book was even better. Our cast, our newspaper staff is back. This time, as if having a newspaper isn't enough to do, they're looking into why vampires, real vampires, are suddenly showing up in Manchester. That's not enough. Somebody's trying to kidnap one of their employees. Who wants to kidnap the employee of a newspaper reporting on the weird and the wacky? I guess you need to read it to find out. Fantastic series. The series is so great that I also found out that C.K. McDonald writes a crime thriller series under his full name, Queeve McDonald, and I listened to the first book in that series called A Man with One of Those Faces. It still has the humor. It's toned down a little bit. It's a little bit more of a serious plot, serious with a lot of comedic relief for the tension. We have a guy named Paul who has one of those faces. He uses that to actually help people. He visits people who are elderly in homes. They're at the end of their lives. Their families are not visiting them. And he goes and sits with them for an hour or so and pretends to be whatever family member they think he is. So you're thinking, well, that's really sweet. Until one of those old jokers tries to kill him by accident. Obviously, he thinks Paul is somebody else. But the next attempt on Paul's life isn't an accident. What in the world has he gotten himself into? It's so good. There's a character in that story that we meet, Bunny McGarry, who has his own series here. I'm going to read all of the books this man ever wrote. I don't care what name he writes it under. Everything by this guy, I am going to read. So we know I'm going to read all of those. Let's talk about some that I'm not going to read. I DNF'd 2 books. I DNF'd Illborn by Daniel T. Jackson because it's not that the writing wasn't there. He can write, but his storytelling needs a little work. My friend Andrew, when we were talking about it, he described it best. There are 4 point of views in this story, and the way that they're written, because they never have anything to do with each other, it's like Daniel wrote 4 novellas and just stuck it in a bind-up. The only thing that tied them together is they had this recurring dream that the author typed out in its entirety every time this dream came up. That got old so fast. Even though I stopped reading it every time, it still caused me to stop and roll my eyes. I also did not like any of the characters. You know, when I first met a couple of them, I thought, oh, I'm going to like these. And there was one, I was like, oh, this one's going to be my favorite. I hated that one the most. Like, I did not like them. I am assuming that was intentional. They were not supposed to be likable characters. It's okay to write a character that's not a good person, but you still want to make sure your readers like something about them. Like they are interested in their backstory or their development, why they became the way they are. There was nothing about any of these 4 characters that I wanted to read about. You know, when we meet them, they all had just turned 18, and it felt like coming of age stories that weren't that interesting. They're all corrupted. I just didn't care. Time's just passing, and all of a sudden they're all turning 19, and I'm like, is this just a coming of age? Like, is anything going to happen? Why is this book called Illborn? They weren't born bad. I actually liked them in the beginning, but then they start having this dream, and I'm like, I just didn't like it. I tried to just read 1 chapter a day to get through it, and I was just hate reading it, and I was like, you know what, I'm done. I made it to like 45% of the way, and I was like, why am I doing this? I am not enjoying it. I don't like it. I don't want to pick it back up. So I didn't. The other book I DNF'd is War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. And here's what happened there. I also recently tried and DNF'd The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I believe what has happened is I have determined I don't like Russian literature, Russian classics. It seems that they were interested in writing about the society, the cultural, the political happenings of the time, which is fine. I just am not interested in that sort of story. And the way that they tell their stories, they make their characters very dramatic, which is not a bad thing, except when they get dramatic and they're having these long drawn out dialogues where that just are not compelling. They're not interesting, you know. And when I picked up War and Peace on the tales of DNFing The Idiot, it was very political heavy, and I read like 8 or 9 chapters, and I was like, you know what, I just can't. Maybe not right now. Maybe if I let some time pass, I can try it again. It's probably gonna have to be a lot of time. A lot of time. I also finished volumes 88 through 90 of the One Piece manga. The next arc is going to involve a ton of characters from the previous arcs. There's been so much time that passed, and I flew through it so quickly because it's so fun that I have forgotten a lot. And so I think I want to stop and do a reread, like a really slow reread, not a volume a day, perhaps maybe a couple of chapters. I haven't quite figured out when or if I want to do that, but that's what I'm thinking, because I feel like I will enjoy the next arc so much better if I do. We'll see. So let's pop through these real quick. I read Gwendy's Button Box, the first book in the Button Box series by Stephen King and Richard Chismar. Middle of the road. There was a lot of really interesting things that happened here, a device that was introduced, but I didn't get enough information about it. That was the most interesting thing of this story to me, and I didn't get enough about what it was. I'm hoping I get that in book 2. I'm really thinking this is a trilogy that should be discussed, reviewed as a whole instead of individually. I'll have to let you know once I read the next 2 books, but this one was just middle of the road so far. I read Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. What a surprise hit for me. This one, you really have to trust the author. I never really knew what was happening the majority of the book. And it's just one of those weird stories that you don't know where it is that you fall in love with it, or it just captivates you so that you can't do anything else except read it. I was so intrigued by what was happening, by my theories. It was really fun in editing because I would be editing previous thoughts, and I had read more since I had filmed, and I just got really tickled at my theories because they were all wrong. Everything was wrong. But the end was so good. I love this. I will absolutely be reading it again. I want to reread it knowing the ending to see how it was woven together, what details the author put in throughout the story that pointed to the ending that we got. I absolutely loved it. I read First Writer's Call by Kristen Britton, book 2 in the Green Rider series. I did not care for it. It was so meh, it couldn't have been any more meh. I honestly only finished it because I had heard the 3rd book in the series was really good. I loved the 1st book, and I'm actually glad that I did go ahead and try the 3rd book in the series because I'm loving it. I flew through half that book in like 2 days. And I just loved it so much, which is so weird. But this to me was just not needed. It provided a little history of the Green Riders. I think it could have been done in a different way. I don't like the method that she chose for how we got that history. In my opinion, wasn't good. It wasn't interesting. It felt easy. It felt like I don't know any other way to do this, so I'm just gonna do this. The first book was so amazing, and for this one to be what it was, my brain could not reconcile it was written by the same person. I'm glad that I finished it. I'm glad that I continued. I won't buy any more books of the series. They're gonna all come from the library until I get through to the end to make sure it's a series that I'll reread and want to own physically. But yeah. I reread The Goners by Elle Stevenson with my Discord. We did a group buddy read. I actually was given a copy of the revised edition of The Goners, and we had a really good time with that. The revised edition has a prologue and some things that were added to different characters that just really helped add to the story and just make it so much better. It was just as good the second time as the first time. Even though I knew what was going to happen, it still had my heart racing. I was still running high on adrenaline. It's like I was expecting a different outcome for some of the things that happened. Of course I didn't get it, but it was like I couldn't help but hope anyway. Oh man, it was just amazing. This is probably my favorite serial killer trilogy ever. Just so good. I finally read The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne because Orbit and NetGalley were awesome enough to give me the art for The Hunger of the Gods. The sucker is amazing. And I tell you, I went in with very low expectations. I sat on it forever not reading it because I just didn't think John Gwynne was going to be able to give me another world, another people to care and love for as much as I did The Banished Lands. And I kind of didn't want to. I wanted to just stay in my little bubble with The Banished Lands with John Gwynne. But sometimes you have to just trust the author. And he did an amazing job on the story. We just have 3 point of views, which was great. Just really dig in deep, get to know them, who they were. I love all of the Norse mythology and the way that John brings it to life in this world. It's so good. It's so good that I finished it the next morning. I started The Hunger of the Gods. I'm so glad that I had that one sitting there ready to roll, and I'm already halfway through with that one. Oh man, it is fantastic. Probably the most badass female fantasy character I've ever met. Y'all need to read this. If you're a fantasy nerd and you're not already a John Gwynne fan and you want to try him out to see if he's for you, Shadow of the Gods is where you can start. Let's see. Next, I read The Tunnel by Joseph Sale, which is the second book in his Illuminati series. They are standalones. It's a series, but you can read these books separate from each other. The first one is Dark Hilarity. I have a review for that I'll stick up above for you. I also have one for The Tunnel, so I won't spend a whole lot of time on it. I will just link it above for you, but it's good. It is Jaws with claws. It is written just so beautifully. Joseph Sale is one of the best wordsmiths out there. He never ceases to amaze me with his craft, his ability to tell a story in the most beautiful way possible. I really loved this one. But what I love most is how this man can write a character and just bare their soul on the pages. He just has this rare ability to write a character, and he writes them so well that they just feel real. Like you just know this person. You know everything there is to know about this person. There are no secrets. You know their thoughts, their feelings, their motivations, what drives them, what makes them who they are. And he explores that in just the most fascinating of ways. And that's not even touching on the Jack the Ripper aspect of this one. Fantastic book. And then we'll close with my favorite read of the month. I don't include rereads for when I'm picking book of the month. I just go with books I've read for the first time. And that is going to be Stringers by Chris Panettiere. This is his newest release. It is so fantastic. Again, I have a dedicated review for this one, which I'll link up above, so I won't spend too much time here. You guys, you need to read this. If you love a good story that's got really well-timed, well-placed humor, this is a book for you. You like the found family trope? a book for you. What about friendships? The kind of friendship that you wish you had, or it makes you realize that you have a friend like this. It is absolutely fantastic. I cannot wait to reread it. I will read this one many, many times in years to come. And that is why it is my favorite book of the month for the month of March. Guys, that's it. Those are all the books that I read in the month of March. I'm just overwhelmed with joy looking back on all of the stories that I got to read, the new authors that I experienced, looking forward to the future and reading more. Man, I love it. I just love being a bookworm. Guys, have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.